on this wonderful Thursday morning, if you're in the US, I guess. And it's the Hour of Empower on the live stream network. So we're expanding and really creating more opportunities for more broadcast and really people who really deserved a voice, but either couldn't get access.
Yeah.
And now we can provide that access through just modeling what we're doing. So the word of the day is feedback, which is so important when you're working with anybody to just know where they're coming from and where you are being viewed as. And I think that's important. So don't want to forget chat. Chat's wide open. We depend on you. And with that, I'll turn it over to my best friend on LinkedIn and an anchor on this show. You know her, Kelly. And I also want to mention the Awesome Journey with Christy Howard. It's a very important show. And it covers ground and individuals that, are heroes in my mind, and gives you a chance to look inside of things that you never even probably knew existed. So, with that said, Kelly, what do you think? Where you been? What have you been doing? And what's your first thoughts on feedback?
Yeah. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. And thank you for your kind words. They always touch me. I think, first of all, I have to say, I, for some reason, was still thinking best practices. So, my feedback to myself is whoops. But feedback is one of the, and I think it's a great time of year to be talking about this. Because I think when we wrap up the year end, we tend to reflect, or we should reflect on what we've accomplished and not necessarily have the focus be on what we didn't accomplish. Um, because I definitely have looked back from, my first live stream being January 19th of this year to now and just am amazed at the amount of people that I have met, connected with, that I truly call friends. Um, yeah, it's been an amazing ride. But feedback, I think too, doing live stream, just sort of staying in that lane for a minute, is taking feedback from people. What do they want to hear, or just paying attention to how people respond and asking for their feedback. And I know we've said this on other shows. Feedback is just a report card. Um, I know sometimes people don't like constructive criticism, but we don't improve or get better without it. So it is just a way to be like, hey, I want you to be the best version of yourself um, when you're doing this. Or I would really like you to answer more questions with this, or I'd really like you to do this topic. Um, and I think those help you get better. Because if I looked at my show from January 19th to now, I'd probably be mortified. Just in the sense of the growth and the feedback. You and I do that with each other all the time, or give feedback on our thoughts on other things or other shows that we see people that are doing that we like, or that we don't like. Um, and then what we can take and learn and grow from. So, and that's what our community is here, is we love to get the feedback and from our listeners and participants, people who sit on this side of this show with us. And we've gotten some incredible feedback. And when I say incredible feedback, that's both, I would say, good and bad. Bad in the space of, hey, you need to improve on this, or hey, we need to change things up a little bit. Um, so yeah, those are my initial thoughts, but I'm interested in what everyone else has to say year end, how they feel about feedback. What are your thoughts, Don?
Oh, I just have so many new thoughts after you just shared your thoughts. And you're right. I tend to, and not that it's always easy, look way back and see where it started.
Yeah.
But I also knew that day it started, I was excited. I wasn't
Yeah.
very accomplished, didn't know what I was doing, but I was excited to get into a new frontier. And anytime you're in known areas, or you really require feedback, and it may not be from people, it may be from your environment, right? You open the
Right.
door to see how cold it is or warm, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden that determines what you're going to wear that day, or where you're going to go, or what you're going to do. So, you're constantly sending out feedback knowingly or unknowingly, and you're receiving feedback knowingly or unknowingly. But at a certain point, what does that feedback allow you to adjust to it to be more relevant in the moment, aligned, connected, congruent, whatever you want to say? And your feedback that you get is based on what you put out there,
Hmm.
right? So how you ask is how you're going to pretty much receive. If you're kind, thoughtful, considerate, humble, and you say, I would really make a difference if you could share your feelings or your thoughts because I really appreciate it versus, what's out there and
Hmm.
who are you getting your feedback is key. Is this somebody that you can trust? Is this somebody that has your interest in mind? And those are key elements. And I think everything we talk about here is nuance, is degree of. It's not like all or nothing. And it's really being in the moment and figuring out through feedback, okay, now that I know this, and this, now
Hmm.
I believe this, where before I presume this without knowing. And if you got to make a decision in a second, you got to take what you presume as being the only thing you got to work with. But if you have more time, and
Yeah.
if you're curious, and to ask a little bit more, you said you really like this. What part of this? Or
Yes.
I'm coming across this way. In what way am I coming across this way? I mean, so, and what happens, you get conversation. So you're not just give me what you got and I'll share what I feel. Things come around to it over time. And I think it's access. But with that, to give access to the audience, Carl Dakins here. Here is some feedback. You're both looking awesome this morning. Well, Carl's learning how to
I love
really
their feedback.
yeah, how to get going with people early. If you think what we've done so far is good, I hope in 50 minutes it'll even get better. So thank you, Carl. Carl is doing some amazing things.
Yes.
Just launched a newsletter, and that's growing. And I would support anything Carl's involved in. So check out his newsletter, check out his posts, and check Carl out, and maybe there's something. Christy's here. Always great to see Christy Howard.
Yes.
Authentic, the cohort on the Awesome Journey. What a trio, whoever comes on that show. People tend to be afraid to get those from others. However, constructive feedback allows us to understand how others see us and how we can go forward and make some tweaks to better for ourselves. Yes, the awesome journey. And
Yeah.
life is an awesome journey that,
Yes.
that requires feedback in order to keep down the straight and narrow road. Uh, and I think that's so important when you honor people when you ask their opinion,
Yeah.
right? Because it means something, and and that's the key. Does it mean something? Because if you're going to ask anybody on the street, what do you think about these new shoes? It's like, what do they care in the first place? In second place, why not talk to somebody who can be a help? And there's certain people's opinion naturally that just being a master plumber, when they come in your house, you just believe them if they're honest.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the issue. Other people, it's like, well, it's a little opaque here. But you know what it does is it allows you to get to know the person beyond the feedback. I think that's the key. Is once you've gotten your feedback, now you've got a conversation, right? And then there's an obligation to say, well, they really helped me out, spent a few minutes checking out what I needed an opinion on. The natural thing is there anything I can help you with, right?
Yeah.
Is there something that you'd like to know, without making like you have to ask me something now. So what do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, such a hi, Christy. And feedback. What I thought of as soon as I saw Christy's name pop up is surrounding yourself with people who give you feedback from an empathetic and compassionate place. Meaning, they're not trying to crush your soul when they're saying like, "Oh, girl, you did not look good today," or you answered that question weird. But true feedback, like and your words matter, and I love having people around me that that will give me feedback. Um, and ginger, and sometimes not so ginger. Sometimes you do need to be whacked across the face with some feedback. um, and not paying attention, I think, so much to the feedback that we can get on social media, which I always revert back to one of my fears of starting on live streaming was uh, the trolls out in social media land. But they're not here. They're not on LinkedIn. They are on other platforms, and excuse me. And I was thinking more about that because, like, Twitter, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. Um, that's kind of like a place where people can't wait to say nasty stuff to each other. It's just so strange to me. Um, but knowing when to, like, there is feedback that you get that it's not about you. It's actually about the person delivering the feedback. They're projecting something on. So, I think sometimes you got to pay attention to who it's coming from, how it's being said, and what is being said to know, is this really feedback that I need to think about and file and make a change? Or is this feedback that is about this person that's projecting something about themselves onto me for whatever reason? Because I think social media can mess with people um, by negative feedback because some of it's nasty. And just knowing the difference of genuine feedback, I think, and just yeah, the feedback that's coming from a place of someone else. It's about their whatever they got going on in their life, and they're putting it on to you. Don't carry that stuff. Move on.
Good points. Well, and I hope everybody's taking some notes today. And while you were talking, what I was thinking about, and I always say, how reliable is a poll of one, right? So if you just talk to one person and you said, well, that must be it. If you said,
Yeah.
if I talk to 4 or 5 people, then I get a consensus.
Yeah.
Right. And based on that, maybe there's some middle. And it all depends on what are you talking about. Some
Yeah.
things aren't that important. So whether you like the shoes or not, or somebody's new hair, is important to a point, but it's not going to change anybody's world. If
Yeah.
someone says I'm in terrible financial straits or I'm having an issue, then somebody who has some experience or maybe an authority on it. And the other thing I'm thinking, sometimes it's not the accurate advice, it's the empathetic advice.
Yes.
Sometimes you want to go to somebody that's a spiritual leader or somebody that's a leader in the community, and they're not going to help you with your problem, but they'll help you with how you view it, how you deal with it. They'll share their experiences. And, I think that's where fear always comes in, is when there's ignorance, when there's inexperience, right? No matter how bad it is, if you've been through it 3 or 4 times, you just know the game.
Mhm.
It may not be good or bad, but you know how it's going to work out and what's involved with doing it. And, the support, and I think that's so essential. And we see this all the time as people get real excited. They get off to a fast start, but they're not willing to put the work in, or they're consistently looking for results that don't relate to reality.
Yeah.
And that's where the feedback isn't coming to those people. So I know you're heavily involved with meeting, greeting people here from LinkedIn. What trend do you see with how people support each other through feedback?
Well, I mean, here is a great example. We get it. I don't know if Linda Coleman is here, but it is her birthday today. So happy birthday,
Happy
Linda.
birthday, Linda, if you're here or listening, or see us later.
And I'll send you a message. I haven't. I did see it in the when I logged in today. Um, I agree on so many things that you said too, as far as the feedback and what the source of it is. And one person's feedback doesn't mean that you need to change anything. And to put this into a LinkedIn business perspective, being in marketing for as long as I have been. I've had sales teams and sales people that would come and be like, "Oh my gosh, all of my advisors are saying that we need to have this, whatever it is, some new piece that they needed to have." And I would be like, "Well, who, and what did they say?" Like, who's everyone? Because we have thousands and tens of thousands in our system. And when you really pulled back the onion, it was always like 2 or 3 people maybe said something sort of like what they've turned it into. But you can't change a business plan based on such a small group to take away resources to create something else just because that's what you think you need in order to make a sale. Um, because that's you don't need a piece of any marketing material to make a sale. People are buying you. So you need to the feedback there is take a long look in the mirror and see what it is that you're selling. And then that's one of my biggest feedbacks on LinkedIn right now is the pitch slap. Stop
Mhm.
it. I just can't stand it. And it's ineffective in so many ways. Excuse me. Um, but I also think, conversely, in business, is asking for feedback because I have had clients that are so in their own head about, or they just have their mind made up. This is the way my product or service is going to market, and this is what I demand. And it's like, yeah, but people aren't responding to it, man. You need to make some adjustments because this is the feedback we're getting from people. And there's some businesses that, and I can say this, some CEOs that truly didn't want any surveys or feedback from their clients or customers, and it was a fear of hearing something bad. And it's like, how are you ever going to get better if you don't know? Because your perspective of your product and or service is totally different than what your audience is because you know it so intimately and you can talk through things and people will be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, or you lost me after sentence one on what you offer or what your product can do for me. And I think that's just key. And you should constantly, constantly, constantly ask for feedback, particularly if you are selling a product or service. That's what recommendations on LinkedIn are for, or Google reviews. Those are the first things we all go to when it's something new, right? We go and look and see what other people are saying about that the product or service. Um, but yeah, I think some people don't like feedback because they're fearful of what it'll be. Um, but then I'll go to my thing, and I don't think Maria's here either, but she always would make fun of me in the best way of, this is where I would insert my other, if growth were easy, everybody would be doing it. So feedback that helps us grow, it just makes us better. So lean into it and don't be afraid of it. But particularly in business, I don't see how you can do anything without feedback from your customers or clients or what have you. So those are my thoughts. And especially this time of year, planning into 2024, what is it that you need to do different or better or start doing to make things better in the next year? Because we shouldn't go into, I think, anything, even any day, thinking, I want today to be a little bit less than it was yesterday, or I want my business to be a little bit less next year. You always want it to be more. I want to do better tomorrow than I did today. And I think that applies personally and in business. So those are my thoughts this time,
I
John.
think, yeah, those were very
That
instructive
was a lot.
and insightful. Couple things, now that we're making Fridays best practices and focused on Thursday, I'm sorry, they're all the same day.
That's okay.
You do it every day. But what I'm thinking of, the best feedback you can get is through doing a poll, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you do a poll, you're not picking out who gives you advice. You're just sharing the subject with anybody who wants to participate, which means you're going to get some more objective people, a few subjective
Yeah.
people, some well-intended people, some not so much, but that's free to you, right? And all it takes seconds, right? I mean, I'm not demonstrating today, but if you want to look at a video on on YouTube on how to do a poll, and it's very simple and it adds impressions because people who do polls don't read newsletters. People who comment don't like. People who do, I mean, so there's a group for everybody out of a billion, and why not have your reach extended to them? The other,
Yeah. And share the statistics of the polls too, because they get like a way higher percentage of views for one. And then just as an interjection, it's a great way to get leads, right?
oh, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Because if you look at the other really great form of feedback is comments. right? So you do a post or you comment on somebody else's and someone comments on yours. That's where I really focused on developing this inbound to outbound strategy. Too many people target people and chase them or try to attract them. And in most cases, people don't like to be chased. And but
Oh,
if you actually see someone who looked at your profile, well, they took an action in advance. And to me, what you were afraid of them being, now that they prove they're not, you shouldn't treat them like a pitch slapper, right? Which also means you shouldn't be selling them as soon as they reach out to you. So I think the best thing to do is deal with something the way it is and for what it is. And my typical approach is gratitude. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit my profile. I'm very impressed with whatever I'm impressed with. And if you're interested, happy to have a Zoom, but just want to thank you, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, someone says, well, I didn't know, you go to somebody's profile, you don't know they're going to know you went there because you don't think they're going to look at who's doing their profile. So when somebody recognized, like, wow, I was here, I dropped something off in a way, but didn't get a chance to see you. Um, and it sets the stage for possibly a future relationship. Again, if
yeah.
you get 20 people watching your profile a day, maybe only 3 apply. So it's not automatic.
Mhm.
When you spot the person, you really say, wow. And me and Kelly have had people like, where did this person come from? I mean, major generals and people running
Yeah.
huge things, and what Harvey's doing with his franchise show on Tuesdays that follow here, the franchise show, always plugging, is you have something, a stage that they want to share their feedback. Maybe that's a presenter. They share their feedback before there's a question, and then they receive feedback on what they delivered. And the key is, how do you launch that beyond just reciprocal? Like we're doing. Kelly
Mhm.
says something interesting. I hear it for the first time, makes me think of something a little different than I would have planned to say if I didn't have the feedback, right? Kelly took it
Yeah.
this way, we would probably end up going that way. If someone changes a subject, that's where the movement is. And I think that's the creative part, because the more I see what we're doing live, there's a mix of theater, there's a mix of art to this and creativity, because you can blend things in. You choose the subjects, you choose the people, you choose the flow, you bring the audience in when it's a good time to bring them in. So it's so many fun things that you can adjust. And if you do it over time, uh, it gets easier, but it gets more understood, you know, because you
Mhm.
really start with quantity in mind. The feedback around, how do I get a bigger audience? How do I get more of this? How do I get more of that? And, it's like anything else. What are you doing with the audience you have?
Mhm.
And people tend to get something and move on to somebody else and think the person they just got is like going to stay there forever. You got to nurture, you got
Yep.
to justify people's time, and I think it's working things up because, like I said, I had a gentleman who was from Pakistan who went to work with me and didn't know the culture, didn't know very much about stuff. And he really, I took him under my wing and he became hugely successful from that. But he was interested in charity, and he always called me Mr. Don. No matter what it was, he wouldn't take the Mr. And he said, I'm
Yeah.
interested in understanding what charity is all about. And he says, I got a feeling when I make a lot of money, I'm going to be a great donor. And I said, well,
Aw.
Ali, let me tell you this. If you're making a little money, give a little money, and then as
Yeah.
you start to give, you'll get into it. But if you wait for a certain amount, it'll never happen because it'll,
That's right. And you always need
that's right.
more.
And I think that's the key is you have to meet people where they are and just deal with what it is instead of saying it's something more. And if you have enough going on, and believe me, there's tons of action, you don't need to push anybody faster than they're comfortable going. You don't need to bring anybody into something that they're not right for yet. And I think once you know that there's more than you can handle, no one thing is worth forcing, because you duplicate. How people come in with you is how they bring people in with them. And I think that's where the feedback's so important. Is there's so many people here, I see it all day in my feed, they're working, putting out stuff, and there's nothing going on. Some people, and I'm sure you've seen them, have huge reputations, and they get 2 likes,
Yeah.
1 comment, and they keep back and
Yeah.
doing it over again, and then they think it's not polished enough, it's not professional enough, and they're missing the point. They're thinking of themselves and everybody being like them versus, hey, this audience is full of people who just feel they're just as good as I am, in some ways better, right? So I think by coming in as telling somebody instead of asking, which is the opposite of feedback, it's not even giving that conversation life. But anyways, let's go to Carl. Beverly's here too. I recommend small businesses build in a fixed set of feedback by establishing a board of advisors representing every area of knowledge needed by the business. That's a wonderful point. And that's why advisory boards make so much sense, because it doesn't have the exposure or liability of being a board member. And you can have different advisory boards based on different subjects. You have working groups inside of a company. So
And those are things you can even do, on LinkedIn. And I've had people who say, hey, I'm just starting this business and I would love your feedback, seeing that, what you've done in your career. Would you take a few minutes and, here's the link to whatever it is I would like you to review and give me some feedback. And I participate in those a lot, depending on what it's for. If it actually applies to me, I don't mind giving a few minutes of feedback. And also giving, to stick in the business realm, I've known several people, particularly since 2020, who have wanted to start their own business and have started their own business, but were completely clueless of certain aspects of how to do it, and reached out on LinkedIn to a bunch of people. Hey, you're someone I admire in the business place. Would you be willing to be on an advisory board? Because I think people are always afraid to ask for help. We talk about that a lot, whether or not it's for, themselves, from a mental health perspective, or in the business place, to be able to say, like, Carl is an example, to be like, Carl, I have no idea what to be doing with my portfolio or how to invest anything. Can you please help me? Some people don't like to admit that they don't know, but you would be amazed how many people would be willing to help because they didn't get where they were without help along the way either. And I just think it makes the most sense for any business, and especially when you're changing a product, have people that you can go to that are, part of your think tank or advisory board, whatever it is, that are outside your business. Because people who are on the inside view your product much differently than those on the outside who are truly having more of the end user experience. It's nearly impossible for you to put your place into the end user without feedback from them, because you see it differently. So I think that's a great point from Carl. And again, I think there's so many ways for people to utilize LinkedIn and getting great feedback to help them, grow, scale, what have you. Because the reason that businesses fail, a majority of the time, is simply because they fail to implement things that they know. And so reaching out to people and creating, whether it is a think tank advisory board, that they can help hold you accountable too, to make sure that you're getting stuff done. Because when you've got to go back to people and report after they've given you feedback, because you should, it holds you to a level of accountability, right? I mean, what are your thoughts
Oh,
on that?
that's a great insight. And there, again, we always talk on the show about balance. And I think the feedback everybody needs to employ is, how does the people you are most affected and affect think, which is usually family, right? Or close friends. You're going to take a new job and it's a relocation. You better make sure everybody's behind it before you take the job and say, surprise, we're moving to Minneapolis next week. Uh, and that's the key is everybody happy? Is everybody optimistic? Is everybody confident? And when you're not, there's a question to be asked. Well, everything's cool, but
Mhm.
I'm hung up on this. Well, the
Mhm.
first thing to do is self-education. That's why I always advise go to Google, go to YouTube. If you got an issue, type it in and you'll get a fast read on it, right? It could be just a definition. Okay, now I know what I'm working with. And now I need to be conversational enough and smart enough to ask the right question, right? To not give away what I'm expecting. If you go to somebody and say, I got something that's just awful, it's terrible, I can hardly speak about it. Well, that person's conditioned for something awful, and they're going to be their mind is going to be focused on that, which either could be commiserate, or could be like, hey, do this, or it could be like, hey, just get it together and do it. And I think that's the key is if you want objective advice, you have to ask for it without judgment in advance. I know this is ugly. I know it is. I know it is. What do you think? It's well, if you think it is, then it must be.
That's the same as those emails when people start off the email to you that say like, "I don't mean to be a jerk, but," and it's like, well, now I know you're going to be a jerk in the next sentence. You're just kind of dismissing yourself from it. So yeah, you're pre-planting the seed for people to think a certain way before you get what their actual answer may have been had you not framed it in a way for them to give you a different response. So yeah, honest feedback is everything, but you have to give them the opportunity to give the honest feedback. I mean, if you're going, "Hey, I really want your opinion or your advice on this," then they'll give it. But if you exactly like you just said, but if you say, "Hey, I want your advice, but be kind and gentle with how you say it to me because my feelings will be hurt very easily," your answer is going to be totally different.
Well, that's why friends and family are not always the best because they either care about you too much to
Or they don't.
yeah, to tell you, it's really not a good thing. But if you're already going to do it, why would I be the one to rain on your parade? Or you got the people that say that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. And then goes into
Yes.
this whole
Yeah.
tirade. Don't you ever learn? And can't you just, I mean, and that should promote people going to professionals and people that don't have any skin in their game, right? Because
Mhm.
their motivation is more pure than somebody's got a vested interest. A lot of times, people don't want to see you get ahead because they think they're going to get left behind. Once
Yeah.
somebody makes enough money, once somebody has enough of whatever they need, maybe I'm not necessary. And now they do both of themselves a disservice because it's obvious whether it ever transpires, and again, everything we ever talk about is based on trust. Is this person looking out for me and my interest, or are they looking out for them, or is there something I don't even know about? So I think you got to be very open to feedback. You have to engage it in a way that honors the person. I know you've had 100 experiences like this. If there's anybody that knows this, you do. Can you just help me? And it's an honor for someone to say, can you help me out? And it's like, well, hey, what do you got? Right? When we want to talk and
Yeah.
talk. So I think at that point, being good, and then we talked about in other words, is being able to happily ask for help. Don't wait until everything's down to the bare bone and then say, I can't hold the line because, you go into a professional and say, well, if you'd have been here a month ago with this, I could have helped you.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those things too, because I think that goes back to whether or not it's for your own mental well-being or if it's in business, whatever it is. You're right. Like nobody finally asks for help and goes, "Man, I wish I would have waited a day longer to do that." Um, but it is difficult to ask for help. And that's one of our things is human beings. We don't mind, when people reach out and ask for help, someone we care about or that we can help, a loved one. We can't say, oh my gosh, what can I do to help you or support you? Like you can't wait to do it to help someone. But then on the other side of it, when we're the ones that are asking, it's a lot harder because people are we're all afraid of being judged. We don't want to feel like, oh, wow, you don't have your stuff together. You're a hot mess. But guess what? Sometimes we are, and there is no shame, and that's what I really honestly loved about doing all the live streams and doing the show with Christy, The Awesome Journey, is because it is about people sharing their stories to reach other people in a way that they can go, I'm not alone, and helping one another, because storytelling is what helps us. That's how we relate to things. And there is a sense of knowing you're not alone makes you feel, I believe, more apt to ask for help, because oh my gosh, if this person went through this, that's way worse than what I'm going through. And don't self-compare, though. I don't think that that's ever a real good thing to do. But I think it provides us inspiration, motivation, and hope when we know that. So whether it is for a personal, emotional, mental health situation or in a business situation, guess what? You're not the only one who's ready to file bankruptcy in your business and not knowing what the hell to do or how to readjust. Because I guarantee you, any of those very, very successful people, and I've known many, they've been bankrupt more than one time along their journey because they're usually very big risk takers. So I just think there's part of that belongingness too, of hearing the stories and feedback to know that I can do that because I see someone else do it. We always feel, I think, a little bit more comfortable when we've seen someone else go through the process. It makes us go, okay, they know that, so I can talk to them and trust them because they know how I feel, or they have an idea of how I feel. So those
I
are my
think you
thoughts.
make an excellent point, and one point that I took from is what we do on this show, what you do on Awesome Journey, and what Harvey does, and all these other wonderful people that have promoted themselves and are now out in orbit there, is giving the platform for feedback to these people. Because you're right, everybody's got a story, right? And some people got some doozy, right?
Doozies.
I mean, good and bad. But and I was actually talking to Greg Martin the other day, who was on Christie's show, right? And he's a major general, and there's
The Awesome
the
Journey.
Awesome Journey. I'm sorry.
Yes, Major General. We love him. He's a great man.
Yeah, but and he went through all kinds of stuff, and he's got a great story that needs to be heard. But we all agreed
Yes.
that whatever it is right now, we all survived whatever it was. Right?
That's
We
right.
got through it. And it might not have been easy. It might not have been a choice that we had, but we survived, and we should be proud of that. The other thing is, a lot of
Yeah.
people are in denial. They don't want to admit that they even have a problem, let alone get feedback, that they have a
Yeah.
condition, and they just think it's going to go away by itself. And they believe it, and it gets worse. And now their challenge is not the condition, it's their ability to be accessible to the help that comes with it. How many people said if they would have just told me they needed money for medicine, I would have gave them a few $100, and because they didn't take it, now they ended up this way or that way. And I think, the key is if you've seen enough people and you've heard enough stories, no story is that different in a way. Different characters, different situations, but it's still the humanity of the person that's either totally excited or totally disappointed. And by sharing it, they know they need help, right? People go to coaches, counselors, therapists. Why?
Yes.
Because they have an opportunity, not an embarrassment, to
Yeah.
change things, right?
And I think that's even an important little factor there, right? Is a coach or a therapist, what have you, is and I've had people ask me this in the past, so I will reshare, is if you're a coach, why do you need a coach? Because I'm a human being, and I think our mental health, particularly in this example, um, and I've said this on my show, this show, and other shows, is that just because we go through, I'll say a cycle, like I was going to a counselor for this period of time, and now I'm finished going to this counselor. That doesn't mean necessarily that everything is fixed forever. It's like it's maintenance, you know. You take your car in every once in a while, and we need to allow ourselves to be like, you know what, I'm just feeling off, and I don't know why. And and sometimes it's just better to have that third party, and I don't even wanna say validation, that third party feedback of because like you were saying, your family sometimes or your dearest friends even sometimes can't give you what you really need to hear, or they're not seeing it in a different perspective that a counselor or a coach, or someone else can see. And it also makes it a little bit easier to share um, things that maybe you don't want to share with your family. I don't know anybody that really wants to call anyone in their family and say, "Hey, I've been suffering from severe depression. I have suicidal ideation. What should I do?" That's going to freak your family out. And I don't mean to poke fun at that in any way at all, but that is when you reach out to someone else and let them be the ones that guide you. And I think Beverly had brought this up on another show, which I totally agree with. I don't know why businesses and organizations don't have an in-house coach, therapist, or something that their team can utilize. Because when your team has their mental health in check, which is part of your health, all in general, you're going to have a much happier, healthier culture. And believe you me, your productivity is going to go through the roof. So I know I skirted around quite a few things there, but I think personally, I think it's important to always have that in your toolkit of a coach, therapist, or whatever it is that you're comfortable with, that you can reach out to when you're having those moments of being able to be introspective enough. You also brought that up, to be able to say, I'm off. Don't know what's going on with me, but man, I'm feeling off. And that's okay, because we all feel off sometimes. Anyone who says that they don't, there's something wrong.
Well,
Because we're all human.
no, that's so important what you mentioned, and everything again is getting comfortable with something, right?
Yeah.
And once you get comfortable with it, it makes a difference. But let's go to Carl. If you wait to donate until you get rich, that day may never come. Donate early and often. So true. Beverly comes back with, yes, it's not about the likes, it's about making valuable connections.
Amen.
To get deep, you have to focus and you have to be involved. To just be
Sure.
spaghetti against the wall, that's not a good foundation.
Yeah.
Christine is here.
Oh, hey, girl.
Christine's been a friend from the beginning when the show was just getting off on its own. So happy to have Christine. Her feedback all along these months have been instrumental, because this is really a quilt that everybody put a patch on, right? And collectively, we've got something that has the ability to provide honest, safe feedback. And one thing I'll add to this is that they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Sometimes you're better off getting feedback so you don't get into a situation.
Yeah.
So it's not just after the fact. I mean, when we were raising our kids and everybody did great, and a decision was made, let's all go to counseling together, just to hear what people are going to tell somebody that they wouldn't tell you directly, right?
Mhm.
And you could learn. And I always did things as a group. Everybody loved it because of the way we approached it, and everybody got involved with it. And what it taught everybody is that's what these people do, and they can be there for you. So it was kind of an education on learning it, not waiting for someone to have a terrible issue and now it's already gotten out of hand. So it's how do you stage certain things? How do you be the first one in line to say, I'll take it, and then you can take it, right? Because anybody can say, hey, you go to therapy, you need it, but I don't, because there's a saying, you can't sell what you don't buy, and you don't buy what you don't use. So how can you be a therapist believing that's what people need, but you're not one of those people? It's just so dishonest. Here's another comment. Good morning, all. I think feedback is too often approached as criticism. Make it productive. You're so right, because
I want to interject one thing on here. There are people sometimes, and I know we've all seen this or had it happen to us, is people will say like, I'm just authentic and genuine in my feedback or whatever it is, but they have no filter and they
mm,
actually say things. It's like, that was actually quite mean. Like you didn't need to say that. Like that's not constructive feedback. And that's not you being authentic and sharing your thoughts. That's actually not nice.
is there a sound? Is it my turn?
I don't know. I just kind of, it froze here for a minute for me. That was kind of weird. No, I was just saying that was my little interjection, is people who claim to be like authentic or genuine, that it gives them some kind of right to be able to say things that really aren't good feedback. They're just not nice.
Well, that's a great point, because it's no different if you go in a restaurant and have a bad meal. You're probably not going back to that restaurant. If you reach out to somebody who gave you a hard time or was just unnecessarily mean,
Yeah.
you don't even take that as a response, right? You just take that as a qualifying exclusion.
Yeah.
And again, when do you get your advice? How long do you wait? And then what do you have to do once you gather all that advice? So it's a journey. And sometimes you pick up clues along the way, and some days you don't. But altogether, you get a better feel, and you always had whatever you had that you were working with as far as a strategy or a way to go about it. But it's also encouraging feedback, and that's where collaboration groups come in. That's where shows like this, right? Is we got 30, 40 people. If everybody shared a little thing, that's 40 times 40, the impact of it. And taking little feedback is easier than taking large feedback, right? It'd be easier for someone to say, add a little mayonnaise to the tuna fish or some salt or pepper, because you already got 90% of it done. But here's my opinion. It's a little salty. It's not got enough, whatever it is. And then what you do is you start adjusting, and then you say, taste it now, right? And there's always a taster in the house before company comes, because you want to have a guinea pig before you get everybody to say, oh, this soup is so salty. But it's the fun of knowing, I'm pretty cool, but I'd love to get your opinion, is a good way of doing it. I've done a lot of homework. I got a couple things together. So it's not like you're totally, innocent towards anything to do with it. And the natural response was, well, what part of this is the most troubling? Right?
Mhm.
I got to go to Las Vegas next week. I'm having a difficult time getting there. Well, what is it? Your schedule, your finance, whatever it is, focus on the most specific thing, because people only have so much time and patience for giving advice. Here's Beverly back again. Yes, Kelly. That's what makes my podcast thrive. We identify with each other's stories, and it's inspiring to hear others' struggles. And it empowers and inspires me as well, because these stories are larger than just me. What I really do is help others. I'll finish it up. Change their story. It is an awesome journey, Kelly. And listening is, what they say, God gave everybody 2 ears and 1 mouth, and people are supposed to use them in the same proportion. You got a gift to gab, and you like to hear yourself talk. But it's all about evolving. It's all about getting a little bit better. It's not like, boy, I'm going to be Superman tomorrow. I just change one thing or whatever. And it's the fun of changing. It's the fun knowing that, hey, it's going to, you get on a road trip, if it's 800 miles, it's going to be probably about 17, 18 hours of driving. So you don't leave the driveway and say, when are we going to be there? When you know it's 17 hours away. Uh,
Oh,
you go with the flow, and it is the camaraderie, knowing there's a place, knowing there's a group that accepts you, that promotes you, that supports you. I mean, Rita Wirtz is coming back
yeah, I
Sunday
saw that
with
with Andre, which is
and
awesome.
D'Angelo. And
Yeah.
what's cool about it is, again, nothing ends. It just continues at a certain point to where it needs to be again. So you can stay in relationships, but they always have to be reviewed and adjusted, right? It's like anything else. Do you need more room? Do you need more space? Do you need more time? Well, when people know you can leave and come back, that's important. A lot of people are like, well, if they don't like what I got to say, I might be burning my bridges with them. And that's,
That's the part that I think people mistake is there be people that come in your life, what is it, reason, season, or lesson, um, or lifetime, because some of us do have lifetime friends, but and obviously family members. But everybody, there is a purpose for every interaction, and sometimes it needs a rest because you're going in two different directions at a time, or you outgrow people, and that's a fact too. And I'll associate that to coaching. um, and I know I've said this on other shows too, and Beverly, I would be interested in your feedback on this as well, is um, you can outgrow a coach too. That just means they've done their job. I mean, if you're going to the same one for 10 years talking about the same thing, you likely need to try something else. um, but which is different, I think, than what I was saying, because I do have a coach, a friend of mine that I've known for years and years and years, and she's one that I can reach out to and be like, "Hey, girl, I need a little chat over whatever it is." But it's not the same topic over and over again, is what I'm saying. But you can outgrow a coach and need someone else because you're in a different place. Because the goal is to evolve every day into a better version of ourselves. So the coach I need today is way different than the coach that I needed 15 years ago, because I was a completely different person back then. Um, so I think that's also important to know for yourself, is who are you asking for the feedback, and knowing when, I need to go somewhere new. I need to get new feedback because I feel like I need something additional, and that's not abnormal. And we also outgrow, I think, relationships and friendships. What is that first kind of cleansing of friends in our 20s, that people from high school, that were like, we have nothing in common anymore, or they've gone down such a different path. It's not the same as it was when you were on the playground playing kickball as kids. And so you move on, and because a lot of times people can be in our lives, if we don't move on from it, it can hold us back from things. Some people, if we're constantly saying, like, we can't get rid of this person because I've known them for 20 years, that's not an excuse to keep someone in your life if they're holding you back in some way, whatever that may be. I don't know. I just think that's an important thing to remember, as we do outgrow people, relationships, and even coaches. What
well,
are your thoughts?
it's happened to me many times. I've
Yeah,
had partnerships for 20, 30, 40 years that were great, but things changed. I changed, they changed, and
yeah,
the relationship wasn't flexible enough to allow it, and nobody wanted it because
yeah.
you don't want to stay in first grade all your life, right? And you need to move to second grade, but you're going to give up the teacher that you first got to know. You're going to maybe give up some classmates and find some new ones. But as you find that nothing owes you anything into the future, you have to earn the present relationship and then possibly build on the future relationship. So you shouldn't be doing something for a day that may never come when you could be doing something for the day that's there. And
Mhm.
the easiest way to equate this is like medicine. Sometimes you need a specialist. right? You could have the best family doctor or regular doctor, but if you got a foot issue, you better be thinking about a foot doctor because that's where you're going to end up anyways. So why not go to the source? And I think modesty doesn't always help people. They only tell half the story because they're ashamed to tell the full story. But
Yes.
if you go to a doctor and say, my hand's bothering me when it's really your foot, then how is it, you're going to get treated for something you don't need and other things will go untreated. And again, it's how you step into it. Sometimes you can kind of poke at it for a while before you have to say, is this person the person really? So, you could direct a conversation, but once you know the person doesn't care, isn't interested, save yourself from all of that because, again, it's just a fact-finding mission. It's not a decision mission. And it's almost like, hey, a lot of times all you want to do is say, do you see what I see? Right? That's the feedback.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with saying, I see exactly what you see. I think you did a perfect job. I wouldn't touch a thing. Well, that's validation and confirmation, but it is feedback because you're not looking for someone to start telling you everything that's wrong with something because they didn't live what you lived to get to it, right?
Mhm.
Someone paints something, right?
Yeah.
In your mind, that's what you wanted to put on a screen. And most people will be like, well, if you put a little yellow in there and you brighten it up there, but that's not what you're going for. You know what I mean? But then again, it comes down to, hey, I got everything right about here. I'm cool with this. This is the question I have on this painting. Or what do you think about this cake I made? Have a little taste. What I'm concerned about, is it too sweet? Right? Or whatever. And that way it's like, oh,
That's a good example though of that. That's people's preference. That's preferential in the sense of that they're giving you their opinion. That's not necessarily I would say feedback. And I'm trying to think of an example for that. Just you can have a family that goes through, or you can take you, me, and Beverly. I'm just saying that because she's on screen. And we can all go through the exact same thing. We could be in the same car, have the same accident, but have completely different experience of how we deal with it afterwards because we're different people. Just because we were involved in the same exact thing. And this goes for families too. Losing a loved one is an example, and I use that with my own family. My mom, my brother, and I all experienced the same exact thing, but we all went through it a whole lot different. And then you have to respect that people go through things differently and accept information differently. But that's also about being an active listener. And respecting each other and meeting them where they're at, which is what you were touching on earlier. So I took a hard left there. I know we've got some other comments.
Yeah. Well, to that point, a lot of times how people are because of how they've been.
Yes.
So you say to yourself, if they say they think you're spending too much money or you're irresponsible, you can start, I know it's a lot of money. We're not even going to deal with that, right? Here's where I see your opinion as being important to me. Right.
Mhm.
So let's focus on that because I know what that other half already is. And I factor that into my decision, and at the end of the day, it's your decision. It's your journey. Until you get into it, this is just to give you a little bit more foundation, validation. And also there's something about being upfront about what you're about to do instead of, there's a saying, it's easier to ask for permission than forgiveness, or it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes.
And it doesn't always work. You take the car and you drive it away for a week and no one knew who took it or where it went, might be an issue. But Beverly comes back with, love that, Don. That's why I pivoted into coaching. Not everyone needs therapy, but everyone could use help sometimes. All the time, every day. When inviting feedback, Carl says, you may require that every critique must be paired with a proposed solution. And, just getting the feedback and not even the words, but the expressions, the emotion.
Right. Well, and put that even in the business world, particularly, that was one of the things that always drove me nuts is people who would point out the obvious, like, you guys need to be doing XYZ. And it's like, well, thanks, Captain Obvious. We don't have the resources, or could you at least offer a solution? We don't need someone else pointing out what we're all very well aware of. Um, and I will say that was part of my thing is anytime there was an issue, I would always try to come up with at least one or two solutions so I could bring it up and say, hey, here's what I'm recognizing. And then here's some proposed solutions. Because you're right. It's easy to be a critic and sit there and poke holes at someone, but that doesn't do anything to help the situation. That's actually bad feedback, people. Just saying.
Well, that's interesting because the response to feedback or before you give feedback is what have you thought or tried of so far?
Yeah.
So if you say, hey, I'm planning a trip to Birmingham, Alabama, well, what have you looked into? You know what the plane fares are, where you're going to stay, what is the challenge? And at least you say, hey, I'm already 90% of the way there, right? And I'm probably going to do it. You know, if you really feel that way, I just want to do it the best I can. Or you even say, I have to do this, right? It's not a matter of do I or don't I, it's how I do. And, you know, that's important to me. Christine comes back with growth is a lifelong project. And yes, I knew I outgrew a therapist at some point when she was asking me to repeat things so she could write them down instead of vice versa. And yes, Kelly said we outgrow all sorts of relationships. And that's the beauty of life is change. Who wants to stand still? Yes, Kelly, you're 100% right. My goal is to move people on and move forward. Clients move on, clients come back to reboot. There should not be a dependency for sure. I mean, and that's you know, feedback hopefully now has been illustrated in a way that maybe you redesign your feedback loop. You know, maybe you look at certain feedback and prioritize it based on how valuable, how thoughtful it is, because eventually you'll get your feedback group. You'll get your 5 people that you can go to for different reasons because of different orientation or situation or experience. But it also gives you confidence. I'm going to get 5 opinions before I hit the button here, right? And there could be somebody who says, wow, did you know this just happened? And that's going to affect what,
Yes.
if I knew that, for sure, things will have to change. But I can't believe an hour's gone by so quick and we just covered one word, but so many beautiful people doing really outstanding work at learning how to learn how to do things better for more people than themselves. And that's the collateral benefit is what you learn, you're going to be applying and allowing other people to learn in one way, shape, or form. And also, once you start seeing the beauty of learning, you want more of it, you know, because once you're sure that whatever I have, I can redo. Anything new is gravy, and if nothing else, gives me context for what I'm doing. So, Kelly, final words on feedback and the show.
Yeah. So my feedback, I like the new logo on the screen better than the
Oh yeah, thank you.
Oh, I just noticed too. See, look, I decorated for Christmas. I've got my a little Christmas tree back there. That's all I've put up so far. Yeah, super fun. I mean, feedback is a constant thing around us. We just have to pay attention to it because it's not always a verbal thing or a written thing. It's also unspoken things about how people respond to us. So just pay attention and be thoughtful in your feedback to someone else. Is it something they really need to hear? And are you coming from a place of empathy and compassion and something, again, that they really need to hear? And don't just be a critic. And that being said, I will end like I always do. Please go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too. That's great feedback.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you on the show as always, Kelly. If you want to come back, everybody, in 23 hours, we've got Jeffrey Lackey and possibly Kelly. And then Saturday, we've got Catherine Chadwick coming back with Leslie. And like I say, Sunday is Rita and D'Angelo. And then Monday is me and Harvey. So there's a lot yet. And, you know, the other thing is we're open to words if there are words that you want us to.
Or topics. even. I mean, it doesn't have to be just a single word. It can be a
Or
thing.
guest, any part of the show, everybody's open to contribute and participate. So thank you again. I can't believe it's an hour, but
I know.
I'm glad
That's
it
how
moves so fast because it must have so much value.